What is going on, everybody? And welcome back to I guess we'll say this is the first episode of the Summit Startup Success Series. We're kind of bringing it back. It's going to be a new iteration. Obviously, this time we're doing it live, but we had a segment of our podcast called the Summit Startup Success Series, and it went really, really well. I met some amazing people. We got some amazing content, and we provided some amazing value speaking with founders of startups or people that have gone through, business owners that have gone through that startup phase in many businesses, one of which I didn't realize I was going to meet one of my heroes that I didn't even know existed. I later found out that he was one of my heroes, but Tom Dusenberry, that is one of my favorite episodes I've ever done. So go back and watch that. Go to the Summit Chaser Production YouTube channel and watch that episode. Absolutely amazing. He, if you don't know who he is, he's the former CEO of Hasbro, and he is one of the guys that brought us, or was in charge of bringing us games like Monopoly. He was one of the reasons I got grounded a whole lot, because his team created the Nerf guns and that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely amazing to be able to sit down and talk to a lot of those people. And I want to be able to do that for you some more now that we have some more time, now that we can focus and bring you a better quality product, so to speak. And we're going to have some amazing guests, one of which is part of the Summit Chasers team today. But what we're going to start with, and we're probably going to be doing this for the first 3 or 4 episodes, is we're going to be really focused on increasing talent density. And that's one of the frameworks for our Summit Success framework, is increasing talent density, which is bringing in the right people, onboarding the right way, or onboarding effectively, and then retaining that talent and growing that talent within your organization. And what are some things that you need to look for, some nuances, especially if you're a newer business, if you're in the startup phase, or if you're just kind of getting past that startup phase? What's the difference between hiring for those types of roles and then hiring for, let's say, if you're a bigger company, like say in corporate, or if you come from corporate, you started a business and you start using some of those same hiring practices and you're wondering, why isn't this working out? Why are people coming in? They're not working the way I was hoping that they were going to work. Their mindset's a little bit different, and then they end up leaving, and we leave a sour taste in our mouth. I waste a lot of time and money, and they waste a lot of time and money themselves. So I'm very excited to be able to dive into this. But first, if you haven't already, stay up to date with all the live shows that we have. We have 3 live shows that we run every week, one of which is the Summit Startup Success Series. That's every Thursday at this time, 8 p.m. Eastern, or if you're like me, at 6 p.m. Mountain Time? MST. I couldn't remember what that was called. I'm going to say Mid-State Time. That's not what it is. It's Mountain Standard Time. And then our Summit Coffee Club, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite shows that we do, which is every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. This week, actually, I will be joined by our very own Adrena Blackburn. She was in our first show, and then she'll be coming on again for this week. And we're going to have some fun games that we're going to play while you're decompressing from the week, and obviously taking a lot of valuable takeaways for your life, your business, and your communities. And then our other show is the Founders Focus, which is every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And that's where we break down some case studies sent in by you. And we break those down with my good friend, John Duffin, and try to bring you some different perspectives from different industries. Even this week, we did a great show on change management and innovation in the construction industry. And there's a lot of great takeaways. We got some really good feedback on how some people in software industry and real estate and other industries were able to take a lot away from it. So if you want to get some different perspectives and really work through some case studies and get involved yourself, that is a great show to join. And if you want to have a little bit of fun, that's the Summit Coffee Club. And then if you want to get tactical, actionable takeaways and things that you can go and utilize right away as you're growing your business, this is the show for you. And obviously, we have our Summit Chasers podcast that gets released every week, and a new one will be released tonight, actually. That will be with Miss Daniel Cobo. Very excited to release that one. So keep an eye out just after this show. That one will be released then. But enough of that. I'm almost out of breath already, so I need somebody else up here to start talking with me. So I'm very excited again for this individual. He's new to the Summit Chaser team, and I don't want to say this to him face. I'm going to keep him in the backstage while I'm saying this. I don't want his head to get too big, but we are ecstatic to have this guy on our team. He's been recruiting in the recruiting space for a very long time, working with companies like Spotify and Amazon and many other companies like that. He just came from Datadog, and already I've learned a lot from him. And already his tenacity and his ability to learn and his ability to just want to succeed is it's something to look up to. So I'm very excited to bring to the show for our, I guess, welcome back show to the Startup Summit Success Series, Mr. Joe Ortiz. How you doing, brother?
Hey, Zach. How's it going?
I'm out of breath, man. I need you to take over from here.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, certainly talking that could happen to you. But no, thanks for having me. Excited to join the team. Excited to be here tonight. I guess I could just give a quick TLDR on my background.
Yeah.
I've been in recruiting quite a bit. Started out like many folks on the staffing agency side, and had a chance to work with some of the bigger names like Robert Half and Kforce, and got to a point during that period where I was like, hey, I like this. I very much enjoy it. Let's look to pivot and go in house, and worked with some pretty cool opportunities mentioned before with some HBO, Spotify, and Datadog, and you know now life has brought me to a point where personal interests such as summer chasers and joining here to help small and medium-sized businesses and companies of all shapes and sizes has really piqued my interest, and the opportunity to partner with you all has been nothing short of amazing thus far, and very excited to be here and chat tonight.
I love it, dude. So what made you fall in love with it?
It's interesting. So like growing up in the industry on the agency side, one of the benefits is getting a chance to work across different industries, different companies, different places and spaces versus like just a Spotify. It's like the one place, the one product, and which is great too. But the ability to work across all different places has really shown me that there's a lot to be had across the US for small and medium sized businesses, right? There's a lot of value in helping them. They drive the economy, they drive small cities, they drive large cities, and helping others is something over my career I've really come to enjoy. And that extension to like managing my team or helping the
Mm.
small companies, like that ability to help them just gives me joy. And so like for me, getting to see them grow their business, hire new folks, collect their wins is awesome. I mean, what's also awesome is like, and I'm just making this up as an example, but if that happens to fall into like an area of interest, whether it's like the company CrossFit or a video game studio, like
Mm.
there's small scrappy startups that have to collect wins as well, and if it falls into an area of interest, that's also pretty awesome.
I love it, man. And clearly you're a family man because we can all hear the baby having some fun in the background.
Oh
And
yeah, to any and all who are listening, it is the witching hour with bedtime, and so with two, the odds are not in our favor. One will always go sideways, and they're fine. It's okay, and the dog's asleep. He barely barks, so just bear with us. I promise I can totally zone out.
no, it's absolutely all everybody on here understands, right? We all have lives outside of it. But that's why we're here. It's because we want to be able to provide that not just the business success, but the life outside of that success and what that looks like for everybody. And a lot of these people, they have families that they want to provide for. They want to create a life for the family. We want to be able to give them the foundations to be able to then do that. And a big part of that, especially when it comes to small businesses, is getting the founder out of the day to day, out of doing everything, delegating. But in order to delegate, you need to bring in good people, which means you have to have a solid, sound hiring, onboarding, and retaining process. So I want to start one place I want to start. And this is because the term hiring process gets thrown around a lot. And if you were to ask 10 people to define what a hiring process is, you would get 9.5 probably different answers, right? It would start out similar, but I feel like somewhere in the middle and the end of their definition, things would get a little bit awry, different. They would differentiate. So let's start there. Let's define what is a hiring process.
It's a great question. Very simply, it's the act of identifying a need and filling that need, right? And that's super 30,000 feet high level. With that said, you're spot on. Hiring processes across different companies come in different shapes and flavors. They all start with having a clearly defined need to hire for. And so whether that's a company of 10, who's looking to hire their first engineer or their first go to market sales rep, or, Facebook, that's a 10,000 person company looking to hire 50 engineers or 50 sales reps in New York, right? Like identifying as a leader, hey, I have this gap. I need to fill it. We need to hire. That's really important. And having that crystal clear to start is really, really imperative, because if it's not clearly scoped at the beginning and you sort of like try to figure it out on the fly,
Mhm.
that just hampers your ability to hire. And so, like, as an example, I have a need, I need to hire a sales rep. So let's just sort of scour the market for, someone with 3 to 5 years in
Mhm.
sales, like super vague. Without really knowing it, you're wasting a ton of time. sort of meandering around looking at folks with different backgrounds when in reality you come to find out a month into your process, we need someone who sold to consumers, has programmatic advertising experience, is probably going to be way more senior than we initially thought. And so like that impacts like salary bands and whatnot. And so going back to the beginning, like anything, like building a house or starting a recruiting process, like a good foundation is really important.
Mhm.
And so if you don't tee that up right, you're almost certainly going to be wasting time
Yeah.
throughout that process.
Well, and to your point, it starts with really clearly identifying the needs that you're trying to fill. And I think that's a big miss. They go surface level with the need, and then what follows is a very vague description of what you need to make successful in that role. So how would you get past that surface level? So you're working with a company, we're working with a company, and they say, hey, I need somebody to come in and run my sales team. I need someone to create a sales process. I need somebody to come in and hire sales individuals because I don't want to do the sales anymore. I need somebody to come in and do that for me. And without getting surface level at that point, I need a sales manager. That's what most people would do. I need a sales manager. I need somebody 3 to 5 years of experience running sales teams. Go, right? How do you get deeper than that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You're going to appreciate hopefully some of these answers in terms of like simplicity, but something as simple as what we would call an intake form. And so like we meet with the founder, we have this need, I want to hire someone, and like, awesome, this is great, tell me more. That meeting gets scheduled, we would send them an intake form and say, all right, well, here's a list of 15 questions, pretty basic, but enough to unpack their need, right? So you dig a layer deeper.
What would be some of those questions? What would be some?
Yeah.
Sorry, what would be some of those questions?
Why is the role open?
Mhm.
What are the main sort of duties, roles, or responsibilities that this person is going to tackle?
Mhm.
What are attributes that they must have? Sort of like framing the archetype or persona or the avatar of like who this person is. And so like I'm going to use recruiting as an example because it's like just easy to speak to. So like this is going to be our first recruiter. So ideally someone fairly senior. Duties, roles, and responsibilities going to be working across my company. So they're going to recruit for sales, or recruit for finance, and they're going to recruit for engineers. So they need to, have multiple disciplines in their toolkit. The person is going to have to obviously be in a scrappy environment because we're a startup and have no resources. So like, we don't really have an applicant tracking system. We work in spreadsheets and docs and no fancy tooling, and we're not going to be able to pay the most. So we're going to have to really be able to tell our story and why to come here. And so you get those attributes. If the ideal profile is top of mind for the hiring manager or the founder, a section of that intake form, all right, well, give us some examples. Like who are folks you think you know of that might be like the right profile, and have them link that there. So like as like a starting base. We would ideally ask for what we would call qualifying questions. And so, as we interview them, these are questions that are absolutely necessary that we can identify in the front end. Does this person meet the criteria? And then, if it was outside of recruiting, maybe there's a within that sort of domain, something specific. Like if it's an engineering position, can we send them a coding assessment? Or if it's a design person, are we going to review their portfolio? Things along those lines. But that intake form would essentially be our source of truth and guiding light for that search.
Yeah. So to hang out there for a second, and the other thing too is like really being clear on what would define success in the role.
Exactly.
And what do we need them to accomplish? Because you made a really, really good point. Is especially if you're going to like the smaller businesses, startups, especially in startups, and then if you hire somebody who has more experience, especially more recent experience in bigger, more bureaucratic companies, they're going to be moving a little bit slower than you need. Right? They're going to have great, maybe good contacts, a good network. There will be some upsides. There will be some strengths you can leverage. But if you need to hire a marketing coordinator, and then you hire, a former CMO for, $100 million company, and you're just a startup, those are very different roles. Titles might be the same, but those completely, the day-to-day is different. What defines success and failure is different. In those bigger companies, failure means you lose your job. In startups, failure means, okay, now we have a bunch of data to learn from. So it's a very different mindset. It's a very different speed. right? So being really, really clear on what would define success in this role and what do we need this individual to accomplish, because then you can attach those to all those attributes that you were just talking to. We need somebody to create a sales process. That's much different than needing somebody to come in and improve a current sales process or hire people into a sales process. Those are very different things, right? So we've defined really clearly who we need. We kind of created the avatar. That's one of our chapters is, define your avatar sort of thing. And where do you go from there? Because this is where a lot of people kind of fall short. There's a lot of like these great tools that you can use, like the Indeeds and even LinkedIn, or what's the other one, ZipRecruiter, all those kind of things. But where do you go from there? You have this avatar, you have this picture of this individual that you think would be successful, right? You have an educated hypothesis, right, on this individual who'd be successful in the role. Then where do you go from there?
Couple of things to do next. Obviously create a job description and publish that and get that up there. And then try to identify what ponds you're going to fish in, right? Like looking for design talent is going to be different than looking for finance and accounting, right? Those pools of talent, they just live in different places mostly. Not all the time, but they're different places. Like you're not going to find a lawyer or an accountant on GitHub, for example, right? Or if you're looking to hire for a construction company, it's going to be different than, so like I think that's important to identify where your talent lives, both like digitally and physically. So talent mapping is going to be big after the job description. In conjunction with that, as you're sort of mapping where the talent is, you're going to want to have your recruiting process start to finish sort of identified, like from the moment you outreach to the moment you sign the offer sheet, like what's that look like? So have that clearly defined. And so like with founders, it's important because if they're the only person doing the interviewing, it to be a lot of time spent. So you want to be as efficient as possible. So having that process really built out that is both measurable. So we understand like what are we assessing, what signal are we gathering, but also we're not going to do 35 interviews from start to finish, and the founder is going to I don't want to say waste, but the founder's going to put in a lot of hours per person. And so like how do we balance that seesaw to make sure we're gathering enough signal, we're efficient, and we're doing our due diligence to make the right hire. And so that's a highly customizable thing. Like every place has their own sort of different recipe to interviewing. But you want to make sure that it's all candidates go through the same process. It's measurable. It's gathering the signal we need. It's also something that like the candidates are also don't feel like they're wasting their time. It's like that candidate experience is really important too, because by and large, most candidates are probably users of your product or have been around your product. So like that's like an experience they have with your company. So you want to make sure it's a good one for them. Because in reality, 99% of the people you interview aren't going to get the job. So you want to make sure that they walk away with a decent experience. So TLDR, circle back to that. You want to have a measured process that gathers your signal, leans on candidate experience, and allows the founder to make a sound decision when they want to bring the person in.
And I want to sit on the candidate experience for a minute, but I want to go back before we do that to the actual description itself. Because I've seen job descriptions that I'm like, I don't know what this person is going to be doing. I don't get it. What are some major differences between a clearly defined, attractive job description and then one that misleads? And
it's you're not wrong. There are definitely some wonky ones out there. I think some core tenets of a solid job description, typically they're broken down to preferred qualifications and minimum qualifications. Within those subsections, there are clear details on what this person needs to have the day they walk in the door, minimum qualifications. What the preferred qualifications are, pretty detailed in nature in terms of what they're going to be doing. And those can even bundle in things that they'll do over time too. Because especially with startups, like you could expect your role to change to a degree every 6 months. And so like those could be baked into the preferred qualifications. And I think that's actually really important, like vision for the hiring manager to have. They also tell a quick story about the company, right? And so like, this is who we are, this is what we do, these are our values, this is why it's exciting to work here. And so you would start with that. have that company blurb. You could even go a subsection underneath that. And again, this isn't super long, but company and then the blurb. And so you can have, did I freeze? I think I froze. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Test. Zach. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I thought I froze there. But yeah, so company blurb, department blurb, and then you refer to minimum qualifications. And so it's quick, it's to the point, it's clear, it's concise, and it doesn't give you any sort of hoopla or like inconsistency. It's just sort of cut and dry. It's the best way to, not the best way to describe it, but I think it's like it gives you exactly what you need on who we are, what we're doing, and what this role is.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of your great points is that really being honest with the fact that, especially depending on the size of your business, if you're, again, smaller, things change quicker, right? So you bring somebody in, their role, at least what they're doing day to day could look a lot different, in some cases every week, or in some case, or months, or, every quarter or something like that. It could look a lot different. So as long as you're honest with that, you'll attract the people who are, they're okay with doing different things all the time. And then when they do come in, they're not like, oh, I thought I was signing up for this. I didn't actually, I don't even like doing that. So I'm going to go somewhere else. So being really, really clear on that, if things do change, be honest with it, right? Don't try to just make up like your ideal, like what you would want in the future, this role to look like. Be honest with what that role is right now, what it needs to accomplish in the next 3, 6 months, or even a year type of thing. And again, if you're a bigger company, then you'll have more clearly defined roles, and then you can be more pointed. But to move on from that into the actual interview process, I want to get more to the interview process, but John Duffin had a good question here. Hey guys, question, are you able to have actual conversations during the interview process, or do you stick with rigid scripts during the interview? We want to tackle that one first, Joe?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And so throughout my career, I'll speak from my personal experience, and this is solely the places I've had a chance to work. We do stick to interview scripts for the assessments. With that said, we have done non-assessing, I don't call them interviews, but meetings. So like a coffee or a lunch. And so if a recruiter's interviewing and they have 4 interviews, which are all assessments, they'll come on site. They'll meet the people in the office on site in the facility, but they'll do a lunch or they'll do a coffee and a chance to have a more formal, open conversation about who we are as a team, who we are as people, what are we doing. And so, TLDR, it is possible, but you want to bake that into the scheduling. And so like you'll have your assessing interviews, the things where you actually measure, quantify, and make a decision to hire or not hire. You can do the coffees and the lunches separate from that, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers the question, John.
No, I think that was great. And it depends, first of all, on the role, right? If you're hiring, if you're a bigger corporation, you're hiring entry level and you're doing a volume of them, then you want it as cyclical, you want it as consistent as possible, because then you get consistent data. And then you can look at, okay, what's working, what's bringing in the best candidates. Okay, we use this process that hired this many candidates and they stayed this long. The churn rate for this hire process was this. And then these people were more likely to, grow within the company. And then like that's what we, define as a successful hire, is who do we bring in and then who grows, right? But then as you get to more, again, if you're a smaller business and, you're going to be chumming with them, like we have 50 conversations a week. We have to like each other in some capacity. We have to be able to stand each other. We have to be able to fit in, and the culture has to work and that kind of stuff. So that initial the screening and top grading interviews, those would be much more to your point. They'd be much more consistent and repeatable. Therefore, they do have to have some sort of scripted essence to them. But then as you get down to the later interviews, which is when you're trying to get, okay, is this person going to fit in with the team? Culturally, can we have a conversation? How do they treat people outside of this? Is this somebody that we would want to represent our company? Then you would have much more, those candid off script conversations, like the dinners and that kind of stuff. And I had a awesome mentor, and he told me a story of when he was growing his business at the time, and he was hiring marketing directors, and then he was hiring sales managers. And these are people who are very customer front, like they interact with the customer, they represent the company out in the world. So he really wanted to make sure that he wanted these people, these are going to be these are the right people to represent the company. So what he would do is he would take them to dinner, But what he would do first is he would have them wait in the waiting room. You'd have his assistant interact with them. So how do they treat the assistant? Are they somebody that kind of looks down? Do they think they're, too good for interacting with an assistant type of thing? And then the assistant would say, so we're not actually going to do the interview here. We're going to do it at a restaurant. And you have a choice between these 3 restaurants. And one would be like a cafe diner kind of thing. One would be like an okay restaurant, like a nice, like an Outback Steakhouse or something like that. And the other one would be like a 5-star Michelin starred restaurant, expensive and this kind of stuff. And then he would judge them based on which one that they picked. Right. And generally they would want them to pick the middle one. They want to have the company's, are they going to take the company's money into consideration and treat it as if their own? Right. So that was kind of step 1. That was kind of his test 1. I'm not going to out him because I don't want anybody who's going to possibly work for him to know what he's doing. And then he would go for dinner with them, and then he would pay really, really close attention to how he treated the waiter, where his eyes were, how he engaged in conversation, and all this type. I can't remember what else he focused on, but he had a lot of parameters that he focused on. So you can mold these types of processes into your hiring processes, again, depending on who you're hiring and what the role is. Right. Again, if you're a smaller company, everybody that comes in has just that much more of an influence on the outcome of the company. So you want to be more and more sure that this is going to be the right person for the role and the right person to represent the company. But again, those first few interviews, those screening and top grading, they're going to be much more scripted. Right. But those interviews are fun, though. The ones where you can like test, like I did one where I would be walking down a hallway and I would get somebody to drop a pen. And then if the person picked up the pen and handed it back to them, I knew that at least their first inkling was to help people. Right. And that's what we wanted. Right. So that you can do all these sort of, I don't want to say, I guess that's kind of scripted, it's more staged, but you can do these, you can test these types of people. Another one I did is I got somebody to come do errands with me, like doing dry cleaning. I never did dry cleaning in my life, but I'll tell them we have to go do dry cleaning. And then we just go drive around and talk. Right. And if they were okay with that, if they didn't feel, uncomfortable, like why am I doing an interview in a truck sort of thing, right? I knew that they would be more likely to be a good fit for the team. So that's a great question, John. Anything to add to that, Joe?
No. I think you closed the loop there very well.
Beautiful teamwork. Look at this. See, this is it. This is actually one of my tests, is bringing you on the show and see how it goes. I'm just kidding. You're already part of the woodwork here. So going back to the kind of the hiring process itself, what are some of the biggest misses, I guess, that you've seen in some of these hiring processes?
There are definitely 2 that I think universally stand out. Misscoped roles at any point. It's just like whether the start, middle, or because if you end it, you end it. So like just roles not scoped appropriately. And then paralysis by analysis. Decision makers getting stuck in the mud for a variety of reasons. And you'll hear lots of athletic coaches say trust the process, like with recruiting partners that you bring on to help. These processes are made in conjunction with you, and so like they're highly customizable, they're custom fit to identify like the things we need to figure out for your need. I think the one thing that oftentimes folks get stuck on is this person's great, but let's see more. And so you start spinning that wheel, and you fast forward 40 days later and you're still spinning, and you're like, holy smokes, what happened? So those are the 2: misscoped roles and paralysis by analysis. And you try your best to avoid those at all costs, and sort of help folks reframe things and take a second to think through some of the folks you've met with, and how they sort of stack up to the role. And to circle back to the answer again, it's just, you don't want them to get stuck in the mud.
Yeah Well, then going back to your candidate experience, right? If you're dragging somebody along for 2 months, right, that's a bad experience, and that's a bad review, that's bad referrals. Like it's not a good look. But also I liked your point of where was I going with this? I had something great. I don't know if it was great or not, but trusting the process. Like you said, like trust the process, right? And you get a lot of backlash on that. Well, like we have to decide between 3 people, and I don't know who to pick. Well, just trust the process. Like, what was your grading? Like going back and get feedback from the people that interviewed them, and what were their notes? What was the data? What did it show you in comparison to the needs of the role and the outcome that the role is trying to create? And then people will say, well, what if I pick the wrong person? It's like, yeah, it could. You're dealing with people at this point, right? It's not an absolute. The point is having a process that you follow that increases the odds of a successful hire. Is if you have a process that you follow and it has shown success, or at least increased likelihood of success, you save how much resources, and resources are time, energy, money, and all these types of things. If you have that process and you follow it, even going from a 60% success rate to an 82% success rate is huge, absolutely gigantic, especially if you're a bigger company, right? Because then you're dealing with a higher volume. But going to kind of the negative side effects, what are some of the most unseen, unfelt, at least right away, side effects of a poor, inconsistent hiring process?
Brain drain is definitely one, where you're spending all this time on interviewing, that work's still not getting done, and so that's being taken on by someone else. The interview in and of itself, just the mental capacity to complete those, depending, regardless of volume, just it's a lot of time spent. Work's not getting done, and so like yourself and or the team are now sort of like harboring that. Other negative side effects are, we live in a day and age when folks are highly connected, and so like you don't want to have this theme of your company is not operating a certain way that's putting folks first, if that makes sense. So you want to try to keep your positive momentum and good rapport with candidates, your clients, and sort of keep that community that you're trying to build positive. It's very easy to have one review cascade to 10 to 50 and they're negative, and then now it's like, oh, it's one or two instances versus now this is a theme, and so you want to try to nip that in the bud as best you can. I think those are two that definitely stand out, universal across different spaces and places.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Both of you and John seem to agree on this. Demoralizing your other existing team is a major issue with poor hires. Huge. Imagine being a hiring manager and you're going through all these interviews just for them to not work out, right? That's going to be a huge morale issue. And then you're more likely to miss some things. You're more likely to not show up. When I say not show up, I mean show up authentically and show up, giving the process all it's worth when you're doing these other interviews and when you're recruiting for some of these people. Because then you kind of get to the point where it's like, what's the point? They're just going to leave anyway, right? They're not going to last. And I've heard that so many times, and it pisses me off when you hire somebody and it's like, they're only going to be here for a few months anyways. It's like, okay, is that a them problem? Is that a you problem? It sounds like a you problem, right? And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, right? There's company culture and there's a million other things that kind of go into that. But still, if that's the case, it does demoralize those individuals that are focusing on trying to bring in good candidates, right? And then a lot of that has to do on the back end, right, with onboarding and training and that kind of stuff, and work culture and leadership and that kind of stuff. But we'll get into that. We'll save that for another week, because that's probably another few weeks, because that's a huge can of worms that we could unpack there. So when we get to, we have a hiring process, it's consistent, it's measurable. We have, we've improved it over time, and we've got to the point where, we have like a 95% success rate. What would, in your opinion, what would be like the clearest, like, economic driver indicator that defines a successful hiring process?
It's a good question. I think so. Back at Spotify, we had satisfaction surveys for hiring teams and candidates. And so like, if you anchor your sort of KPIs or like individual success measures, at least to a degree, I think that's a start, right? Like you want to make sure all parties involved had a positive experience. I think that's one. Obviously, after the person starts and is onboarded, and this is more of like a retro because it's time has to go by. But if you look back and say, it's been 6 months and this person has already accomplished X, Y, and Z, like not only did they meet expectations, but they exceeded expectations. I think you can go back and use that as an example of, all right, well, we did that right. We made a good decision there. Why was that? Sort of like take it a layer deeper after that. But to go back to answering your question, I think simplistically just satisfaction surveys to make sure like folks are good. Other recruiting metrics too, like did we take X amount of days to get this done and accomplished? Did we go through one offer extension and accept? Did it take us 3 offers to get it accepted, right? So like, I think that's another data point too of like, can we close the folks that we want to try and close? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you go 1 for 1, awesome. But if you go 1 for 7, what happened there, right? Like let's take that a layer deeper.
Mm-hmm.
I think within each section of your interview process, you can look at what we call conversion funnel. And so, if the process starts with the founders, like interview 1, and the founder met 15 people, but only passed 2 of them through, probably something's not calibrated potentially,
Yeah.
right? It's like something to unpack there. Or conversely, if the founder met 15 people and all 15 went through, and then only 3 of those passed the second round, right? You see, like you sort of
Yeah.
like go layer by layer through that to see like how efficient were we throughout. And so, if that's a number that we all agree is good per section of the funnel, successful. And so like there's a lot of things we could dive into there, but I think those are some of the core KPIs I would look at.
No, there's one thing that well, there's a lot of things that you said. But there's one thing I kind of want to unpack, that this is a good indicator for how your company itself is being perceived by candidate pools in general, right? Which is, how many offers does it take for them to accept it? Because if you're constantly getting stuck doing battles with some of your competitors on wages and benefits and all these types of things, then like that in itself says something, right? And what it says could vary. It could mean that it's not, maybe it's your vision. And we talk about vision and mission with some of these businesses. If you have a vision and mission that is so strong, you're going to attract the right people, and they're going to want to work with you to accomplish that mission, because it means a lot to them as well, because it's so clear that they'll pick you. They'll pick the first, like, just shoot me an offer, fair offer, but shoot me an offer, as opposed to you're always getting stuck in like these bidding wars with competitors, right? Like that is a good lead indicator with how you're being perceived by candidate pools and the public in general. I think we could unpack that for another hour or so, but we don't have that much time. People need to get to their ice cream and bedtimes here pretty soon. But no, this is a really good start, I think, and there's a lot that we can unpack with this. But for you, you're a founder, right? Startup, small business owner. You just starting to hire, right? You're just like, okay, I hired my brother and my cousin and my mom's friend from school. I've hired my former babysitter and all these kind of things. But now I need to start hiring a team. I need to start hiring specialists. What's the first thing they should do?
It's a great question. I think have a level of self-awareness and a couple of key points. Like, what are the strengths and weaknesses of all the folks that currently exist? I think it benefits the company and the business to hire folks who supplement those weaknesses with their own strengths. I think it helps to hire really awesome people at what they do and trust their opinion and trust their ability to make the right decision for their respective part of the business. I've worked with really smart, accomplished VPs and SVPs who direct quote was, "I try to hire people better than me and then get out of their way." And so I think that's sometimes maybe a tougher dynamic to sort of absorb as a founder of a company with like 5 or 10 people. But these are folks that have like worked at Apple and started their own company, high successful exit. I've gone back to big corporate America. Like they had the same philosophy in all those places, whether it was Apple or their own company. Hire awesome people that are really good at what they do and then get out of their way. And so, hearing that, I think sort of resonated because it's true. So I think going back to sort of circle back, especially as a startup that's really small, like what are we really good at? What are we not good at? And so like when you open roles, try to really hire people that are good at the stuff that you're not good at. So you can fill those gaps. And so I think that's like the biggest thing, like that level of self-awareness as a business owner is key.
Yeah, big time. And then if you are somebody who has that team already, doing the same thing with them, like doing that SWOT analysis on your team. And are they currently doing those things, or are they all over the place doing all sorts of stuff, and then everyone's running into each other, sort of thing? But you made it work because you're a small nimble team and you can communicate, right? Or maybe they're your neighbor, whatever it is. And then finding out what those really are. Like, what are their strengths? Where should they be? And then you might have to have, a tough introspective conversation with yourself with, are these people the ones that I need around, that are going to be around long term? Or do they have the potential to learn and grow into these other more specialized roles? Because like you said, we can't keep hiring jacks of all trades. We have to hire specialists. We have to hire people that are masters at these things that are a lot better than you. So like you said, you can plant them here, put the processes in place, align them with the vision and mission, and then get out of their way. Right at that point, you're just decentralizing and communicating, with other aspects of the business kind of thing. But I absolutely love that. And then also, as the founder yourself, identify what you're best at, what strengths can you leverage, and what type of tasks should you hold on to. What are your highest value, activities? What are those things, and what are you currently doing that's not allowing you to leverage those things, right? And then can I disperse those to my current team if they align with their strengths? And if they don't, now I'm really clear on where the gap is. Okay, I don't know how to market. I suck at content marketing, so I'm going to hire for that. Or I love my product. I love my team. I love operations. I don't like to sell. I'm not really great at selling, right? And that's a big gap for us. So maybe I need to bring in somebody for that. But getting really, really clear on that, and then you rinse and repeat down to the process that we started, is getting really, really clear on what would define success in that role. And then what do we need that person to accomplish in the next 6 months to a year? And sometimes if you're a startup, maybe it's just 3 months to 6 months. And then start breaking down, okay, what are the attributes? What are the characteristics that they need to be successful? Who exactly do we need to look for as far as experience and that kind of stuff from there? And then that's a good place to start. And sorry, I'm talking fast because there's some people that are saying, so Kevin, hire people smarter than you and get out of the way. Exactly. Yeah, we reiterated that. And we can say that, everybody could say that, and I would still put it up here because it's so important. It is so important. You don't want to be the bottleneck that holds your business back by trying to micromanage everybody. Right? Hire the right people, get the processes in place, and then you're a support system at that point, right? Let's see. What did Chrissy? That'll be a fun question to ask founders. What's the craziest connection you've had to an early hire? Because seriously, I do have a babysitter from my past who's making. I see what you're saying. Yeah, who's the craziest connection you had to an early hire? Well, yeah. What's the craziest connection? Like a founder, they're in a startup or maybe a small business, whatever it is. What's like I had to hire my old math teacher. Like there has to be somebody who's like done something like that, right?
It's a good question.
For me, I hired my a boxing coach once.
There you go.
And he was doing customer service, right? He wasn't that. He was a hard worker. I'm not going to say anything bad about him. He was a hard worker, right? But other than that, I don't. That would be an interesting one to ask Chrissy. We're gonna do a poll. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to ask that question.
I'll tell you what, to sort of like segue a little bit off of that. I've interviewed some pretty cool people from like interesting backgrounds, like, people in the CIA to former NFL football players to like quarterbacks at SEC schools. Like the conversations are awesome across the board. And, it's one of the best jobs or parts of what I do is like getting to meet and network and chat with those folks. And those 3 particular instances, I've kept in touch with those folks over time. So like, pretty cool experience.
Well, that's a fun experience too, because everybody has their own recipe of experience that makes them so unique and develop their own like strength stacks, right? So you get somebody who, they went to school, they became a professional football player, they got out, maybe they did some speaking and they supported, or maybe they coached or something like that. Like that experience, it could translate over, be very, very strong for something that you wouldn't expect. So it'd be fun. Like that's a really cool thing about like recruiting and kind of like, okay, what puzzle piece can I make the most successful in this spot, right? And kind of creating that, like finding what that recipe is. Like it's really, really interesting. And that's why I like this topic so much. But anyways, everybody get back to bed or get to bed if you're on the East Coast. Joe, I haven't heard your kids. Yeah, so I think we're a win.
I thought about that maybe 10 minutes ago. I said, "Oh, it's really quiet. That can only mean one thing."
I might have jinxed it, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time. But I really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, you're going to be one of the mainstays on the show. You have so much to offer, and again, we're just so thankful that you're a part of the team in general. And thank you so much for jumping in. Thank you, Adrina, John, Kevin, and Chrissy for jumping in and being a part of it. We hope that you join us next week, and again for some of our other shows. If you want to stay up to date, again, I'll remind everybody, sign up for our newsletter. And I'll put that in the description after we get off of here so that you can sign up for the newsletter and stay up to date with all the shows that we have, some great podcasts and great other guests that we're going to have, and create some valuable takeaways, have some fun, because business is stressful enough. We might as well have a little bit of fun with it. And when we're having fun, we're creative and we perform better. So that's why we're doing it the way we are. But again, Joe, do you have any last words for everybody?
No, Zach, thanks for having me. Excited for any future ones, and hopefully it went well.
It went really well. I can tell it went well. So I'll let you know. But anyways, thank you again, everybody who stuck around with us and hung out with us and interacted. We really appreciate you, and everybody watching this. We appreciate you too, as the ones that are watching on the replay. But until next time, everybody, keep chasing your next summit.